name is Julianne Meyer, and you are watching Own Your Wellness. And I am so excited about our guest today. I'm pleasantly surprised he said yes. I met him on New Year's Eve on the red carpet. We were at an event, a wonderful event, Global Unity, and I had the opportunity to do like a little teeny weeny mini interview on the red carpet, and I was so inspired. And you know what? Let me put it this way. You know, there's some people whose energy you want to be around. This is this guy. So let me introduce him, Dr. Stephen Ezra West. Welcome to the show, sir. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Julianne. I'm honored too. And what a beautiful memory. New Year's Eve. So many people all dolled up.
It was fun. We came out in the rain. I know in California, it's like a weird thing to go out in the rain.
5 inches just dumped down in about a half an hour. And they said it's killed more people, what's happened since New Year's, than all the fires that have been
really
happening in California the past 5 years or something like that.
See, yeah. I did not know that. To me, it was just one of those, oh, it's a lot of rain. I'm from Seattle, so I'm like, who cares? But knowing that now, I'm just, okay, it makes a lot more sense. But anyway, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Well, I was sort of born into it, the son of a internationally famous scientist who discovered the engine of the cells, the sodium potassium pump that generates the power for cells to work. And he pioneered a lot of the lymphatic system. And he wrote formulas with his physics background for what shuts the cells off, how to turn them back on, tied in then a diagram introducing people to the tree of life scientifically. And everything we think, say, and do positively helps turn on the life processes. And every time we break any of the laws of nature, it shuts them off. So they're all interconnected, and they all tie into the life and death process of the cells. In ancient times, people have known much more about this, but in a nutshell, I stand on the shoulders of geniuses. And my father was doing that. He had some of the top medical minds in the world on his advisory board until the day he died. I was his top student, and I've had the opportunity to study from some of the best, like, the last Elliott Crescent Gold Medal recipient, Dr. Joe McCord. Not many people have heard of the Elliott Crescent Medal, but it's more prestigious than a Nobel Prize. Nikola Tesla was an Elliott Crescent Medal recipient. It came out 50 years before the Nobel Committee was assembled. And then, this is only reserved for people whose life work revolutionizes and changes the world forever. It's not been so political like the Nobel Prize has been, proven more and more to be more political. So anyway, there's some new things to share here. Just made a life study of this, not just 10 years of schooling, but my whole life. My father made it a lifelong effort as well. So there are things that we're seeing certain patterns happen that we need to alert people. And it's amazing that, it seems like the bigger solutions, they are not seeing, even though some of them have been staring us right in the face. But just I've learned, as far as practical application of techniques that I've developed myself, a lot of that's come out of my own personal injuries and applying principles and figuring out new ways to create a healing technique to solve a problem. So ripped out my PCL out of its top insertion out of my left knee when I was T-boned in a wave runner accident. Both wave runners were totaled with my knee in between them. And this happened about 29 years ago. And out of that, I was inspired with a stem cell technique that doesn't cost anything to do because it's activated. We use the power of the word to activate the physiology, which is functionality, and, through prayer. And I think it's the most advanced stem cell technology on the planet. It's the safest, most effective. I don't know anyone with as great as success stories. I didn't know for sure what my results had been until 20 years later. I got another MRI to prove that I had reattached the PCL. They said that would be absolutely impossible to do without surgery. But stem cells have those kind of abilities. They can perform other kind of miracles that you can't perform other ways. So that's just one of the areas. There's going to be some significant master keys for regeneration is what I'm here to talk about.
And I love that. I'm so excited because, a lot of the times I'll have guests on the show that they may be doctors, they may be, but it's all science and just book science that's already out there, as opposed to in mainstream, as opposed to, stuff that's been around for longer, like the power of thought and the power of words. And, I love how you integrate everything, because I just want you to talk about it because I'm absolutely fascinated. But yeah, let's talk about some master keys.
I like how you use the word integrating everything also, because we've actually taken and disintegrated so many things out of our public school system. And you can't have something accredited if it's integrated with prayer, for example. There are a lot of things, and it's, how we do one thing, they say, is how we do most things. So there are certain things that when you start disintegrating that whole category of our life that connects us with what's the whole realm of spirituality, there's a lot of things that people miss out on. And, Einstein actually said the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, the rational mind a faithful servant. We've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
No, that is very, very true. And I'm just so excited because this is something I've always been passionate about. And there aren't a lot of people who really understand. And honestly, you're one of the first people who knows way more about this than I do. So I am really excited because of your own experiences and the tested and proved methods that you've actually created yourself even. So I just want to hear more about, because you said that, this is something you were born into, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you'll adopt that or, take that on. So what was it that made you, really accept this and run with it?
It's kind of rare for someone to actually adopt such a great legacy and be able to move forward with it. I actually had a spiritual experience happen, and we're going to talk. It's going to be a constant integration of that throughout this talk, probably. My father always gave credit to God, even for the sodium potassium pump, never claimed credit for it, even though he's the one that really discovered that. And he made other contributions that he never claimed credit for. He gave credit to God for the things he discovered. And every time he learned something from somebody else, he always gave them credit within the medical community. So, I think it just adds credibility when you're giving credit where credit's due. So what made me, I kind of lost track of your question. I'm sorry about that, Julianne.
No, it's conversation, so it's quite all right. I was just wondering, if there was anything in particular that really made you take up this legacy and run with it.
It was not something that I was excited to do, because I knew working with my father was like trying to grab a lion by the tail. I didn't think that it would be very fun to be in something like family business politics. I'd already seen enough of that in my life as, with some older siblings of mine, one in particular. And I didn't want to go that route, but I had an epiphany happen 3 times in a row where I was spiritually shown that I was supposed to do it, what I could do, what the results would be if I did. And I tell you what, the first couple times I was like, my response was, well, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. I think you just ought to find somebody else, because my father was already trying his best to get me to work with him. And I turned him down several times. And he was making the offer even too sweet as far as what he was offering me. And I'd tell him sweeter and sweeter. I said, you know what? The last offer was too sweet and you're too much, but the answer is still no. I wouldn't tell him my real reasons. But after really being shown, I approached him after the 3rd time. I knew what that meant. And I said, I'll work with you on one condition. And he said, what's that? Took a step forward. What is this? I said, I'll do what I know how to do to help you and not what you tell me to. He took a step back, thought about that for a few minutes or a few seconds, and he stepped forward and said, let's see what you can do.
Wow. I just got goosebumps.
We started a radio show because I could see his struggle. He would blow people away with his passion, but he was leaving people behind as far as they couldn't follow what he was saying logically. So I scripted the presentation. I would come on the first half of a show and break it down, make sense out of it. And then he'd come on and blow people away with his enthusiasm. Didn't matter if people couldn't follow what all he was saying, bouncing back and forth just because he was so excited. But that's hard to compete with enthusiasm. If I had to choose just one or the other, I'd rather have the enthusiasm. But it's really good to have a balance, be able to come from that. But,
yes, absolutely. And that's something that I've enjoyed speaking with you, is because even though you understand extremely complex ideas, problems, etc., you explain it in a way that you haven't lost me yet. And so I appreciate that, because it wouldn't really serve anyone if they can't learn because they don't understand. So I appreciate that you have this way of being able to explain things, but not losing the message while you're sharing.
mm-hmm.
So something that you and I were talking about barely before we started the show, we were talking about inflammation. And I was hoping we could start talking about that, because you said you had some ideas that you wanted to share.
Yeah, as master keys is what I'd like to focus on. And there's a master keys to inflammation. In fact, 100% of the deaths of COVID have had a terminal inflammation. Regardless of comorbidities, which means they're dying of more than one thing, which most all of them are. That they all have this terminal inflammation, because it's a master key to all these diseases. And so they'll name the diseases according to where this happens, how it affects that part of the body, and who discovered it. And a lot of that is because of something called the cytokine storm. But what it is with inflammation is there's a master key with something called albumin. And it's the same blood protein that you see around a single cell of a chicken egg. That's wrapping around, that's the same clear fluid that's basically albumin in water with all the nutrition that stem cell needs to grow a whole chick without any external source of anything else. It's the main carrier for the nutrition. According to the Merck manual, it's also the main carrier for the drugs. It's what transports the drugs throughout the body. And if you understand why drugs kill, can you give them anymore? Well, maybe that's the reason why they decided not to talk about it leaving the bloodstream, which we lose the whole content from the bloodstream every 24 hours. And if not for the constant efficient retrieval by the lymphatic vessels, which you have more lymph vessels than blood vessels and more lymph than blood, it's a sub-pressure one-way circulatory system instead of a positive pressure two-way circulatory system that the blood is, that we've been taught about. And is that too complicated, or should that be taught in grade school, if that's true? It's supposed to bring that albumin and dump it right back in the bloodstream right here on both sides of the neck. There's the subclavian vein on both sides. As it comes up through the thoracic duct, right up between the lungs, with every deep breath that we take especially, it shoots like a geyser. Like an oil well, it should be springing up into everlasting life with every deep breath we take. It's like we have an internal fountain of youth, and it's right under our nose. But how many times has that been taught in mainstream media with so many people that needed to hear about it over the past few years? Instead, they said, just put a mask on, which doesn't activate this lymphatic system, which is the main aspect of our immune system, really. It's the main aspect of terrain theory. And in the early 1800s, one guy came up with a terrain theory, another came up with a germ theory. And on his deathbed, he said, the germ theory is nothing. The terrain is everything. The guy who came up with the germ theory. Not that germs don't exist. It's just when we maintain a healthy environment of the cells where there's no inflammation, our white blood cells and lymphocytes have time to create the antibodies and to eradicate any poison, toxin, any virus in the system. The fact that most of us survived the first waves of COVID before any so-called jab came out, that proves that we create our own antibodies just as good today as we have for thousands of years. But they don't want to talk about that. And our own natural immune system is our lymphatic system. Our white blood cells and lymphocytes, which are made of white blood cells, they actually come from our stem cells. And if you have white blood cells or lymphocytes running around in your blood, you also have stem cells running around in your blood. This is another thing that the whole stem cell industry doesn't want people to hear about, that there's already a way that our body's been producing and transporting them. And it's mostly dormant compared to what we can do if we really know how to open up that floodgate. We can get that production going, just like knowing how to really activate the lymphatic vessels. It starts with deep breathing, and then we get into bouncing, because the whole thing's lined with one-way check valves. At the bottom of the bounce, they close, and at the top they open, and that pushes fluid through. And how simple is it? What could be done just with that? And someone as enthusiastic as Richard Simmons, who still today has the greatest weight loss following, what if he knew that, where he could get people also on the mini trampolines? What would that have done with somebody as powerful, had such as powerful energy and enthusiasm as he had? Well, they didn't want to go that direction. These have been options. I haven't been someone that's been just saying, just don't take the jab. No, there's so many other things that we can do. And that's been the debate, is, should we take it or not? It's like, do we wear a mask or not? And instead of just talk about whether we wear a mask or not, what about, activating all these other life processes that turn our immune system on in a healthy way, that keep the inflammation out? If you don't have a terminal inflammation, you don't die of COVID. We haven't had one case. Doesn't matter how old or young they are. They all have had a terminal inflammation, and they don't talk about this. There's a master key for several different parts of this that I'm going to cover. There's one for the cytokines that I'm going to get into later. But that's the genetic side of the equation. And the cytokines is less than 1% of what that master key regulates. But just the inflammation alone, it's amazing that we weren't taught about, hey, don't just sit on the couch watching TV if you're stuck at home. If you're dealing with something, there's one technique that I've been teaching to keep the lungs clear, so they don't have pneumonia. And that's one of the things with all the fluid building up the body. It fills up the lungs, and that's what people end up dying from. In fact, the number one cause of death for elderly is pneumonia. When they fall, they break a hip, and it's the 2 weeks sitting in the hospital bed waiting to recover. The lungs fill up with fluid because they're not used to the lack of activity. Well, there's one deep breathing technique that can just not just keep the lungs clear, but activate lymphatics throughout their whole system. That they don't teach, that something like that could do that it physically will activate the physical mechanisms, not just to activate lymphatics throughout their whole rest of their body, but also to really keep their lungs clear. What could we do with a simple technique that doesn't cost one penny to do? So I started a Beat Coronavirus and Thrive video program. It was a podcast that I had to stop when they started taking my videos off social media, because I couldn't afford to have my whole channel just taken away.
Yeah, exactly.
So after they did that with the first time, I hadn't been given any new information that I hadn't given before. It's just the way that I was presenting it with what that was. So, it's sometimes we got to be careful. It's who's listening sometimes with whatever we're saying. It depends on who's listening, how smart we are too. Something to always remember. And there's a lot more people out there listening than who we want to listen, evidently. So I'll be careful what I say and how I say it. It's always been that way. There's this key of our lymphatic system and what it does to get rid of the inflammation, though. I mean, that's the disease environment of the cells. There's an environment for all the degenerative diseases, and it's whether we have inflammation or not. That's the biggest key to terrain theory. I got to tell you, it's this lymphatic system is so beautiful. When you get into it, there's really no place for the lazy person. That we all have a set of lungs. It's just knowing how to use them. So, and how to get on other physical activities like dancing around. When we're inverting, even doing front and back head roll, forward rolls and back rolls when we were a kid, that inversion activates lymphatics. Just, these kids have so much energy, and the adults wonder when they get to a certain stage why some of them have a hard time keeping up with that energy. They say, sit down, sit still. We got to be careful what we're training our kids to do. Give them the right thing to bounce on if you don't want them jumping on the bed. Do you remember how it felt? Remember how that felt just to jump on a bed when we were a kid?
Oh, that was the best. Even rolling down the hill, I love doing that too. All these little things.
how does this tie into world peace even? Because
Mhm.
everything we think, say, and do positively, in ancient times, there were blessings and curses of different principles of nature shouted off of different mountains.
Yeah.
And somehow that data was lost. I mean, Gilead, remember what's the other mountain name? Anyway, there's a couple different mounts. There's a time where they knew more about that, and then the information was lost. It's like the abusers didn't want to have that information out there because they didn't have enough elbow room to do what they wanted to do. So they just pushed delete on some of that information, what they allowed
Mhm.
people to have access to. And it's happened over and over again. But there have been
Yeah.
times where that information has been restored, like the Sermon on the Mount was
Mhm.
the most famous sermon that Christ gave. And it was, with the Beatitudes in it, blessings and curses of every principle that he was sharing, one at a time.
Mhm.
Go check it out. Blessings and curses, one at a time. Somehow, people have lost touch of nature. There was a restoration, and the thing that Buddha had left behind was his footprint.
Mhm.
There weren't even any statues around to worship, from what I understand, while Buddha was alive. He wasn't about himself like that. All he
Mhm.
wanted left behind was the footprint, and within that were the symbols for the principles that he wanted people to understand. So it always comes back to what are these principles of nature, and they're the same no matter
Mhm.
where you go. There's a consensus, and there are people who have already got into AI databases and have already proven the moral ethics of what I'm talking about between like the Taoists
Mhm.
and Christianity, you know, within the Sermon on the Mount. There's already people who have, and within, 3 seconds, had 4-page printouts at a very, it's
Mhm.
amazing what's coming. I took many years and I scripted a presentation, a video docuseries. It's about 20 hours long, all scripted material called The Laws of Empowerment. And that's a free gift for everybody watching. It's thelawsofempowerment.com. And you
Let
don't
me
have
write
to,
that out. Laws of,
here.
here we go. Let me add that. Here we go. How about that? Thelawsofempowerment.com.
You got it. So perfect. You really need the word "the" there. Otherwise, you're going to see, you know, some of the so many other people who have been empowerment leaders, like in the corporate world. John Maxwell, for example. You'll see a lot of other material
Mhm.
there. Empowerment's a
Yeah.
big field, but all empowerment is bittersweet. I gotta say that I can say that over and over again. If we learn how to embrace whatever it is that's out of alignment in our lives, so whatever the pain is,
Mhm.
and listen to that, that's really what shows us how, where, and what to shift more than anything. And especially when you do it with a attitude, with a spirit of prayer, when you
Mhm.
really open up that way, because just like most of our blessings physically come through other people, that's just how things work.
Yeah.
And spiritually, there's a whole other way that works, spiritually as well. I really believe that. I believe in all the angels, all of that. So if you, so there's that as a gift. If you want to understand how every system of life's made of systems, and each system has a certain amount of laws. Whether we're talking our financial system, whatever system you want to talk about,
Mhm.
and figuring out what those laws actually are, where we've been out of them the most, what's been out of alignment with the world peace we've all been wishing and hoping for. Nothing's controversial about wishing and hoping. Look at what it's done for all the beauty pageant winners. But to show exactly where we're out of alignment
Mhm.
and what the solutions have been that's been holding us back from that the most, and what can solve that problem to help create that world peace the most. Well, that gets into all the most controversial things that we can talk about. And I'm talking about things that people have been killed over. We're talking about lots of individual areas.
Mhm.
And to be able to talk about all of them, especially the main areas, and to be able to pull it off with enough love and understanding where you can actually continue a positive conversation, that's never been done before. that I've been able to tell. I studied the lives of Gandhi, other people who were known as world peace leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really disappointed at the lack of any plan for world peace.
You're right.
So there's
That's
a
the missing
plan.
component.
One of the things I'm doing here right on this show for 2023 is we're announcing a special Grand Council. And I'm expecting the cream of the crop of every lineage to show up for a consensus on what the actual principles are, as well as what the actual plan is for that world peace that we've all been dreaming about. And I'm using this this video docuseries that I produce as my 2 cents that I've offered for actual plan and what the principles actually are, at least a basic foundation. But it's better than any every time we've done this, we've built on other foundations. Society's done that. Even the great temples in Rome were built on other ancient civilization foundation work, evidently, that have existed way before that. The foundations were built already for them to just put those pillars up. So this is what I consider the laws of empowerment. We're standing on the shoulders of geniuses. And I like to give credit where credit's due every step of the way. It's like we've had a lot of great documentaries over the years, but where's the one that really ties them all together?
Exactly.
And I'm sure that the parasitic elites don't mind if I'm talking they're parasitic elites, because there's elites who are actually doing their best to help humanity. But the parasitic ones, they don't mind when a documentary comes out about like the one called Who Killed the Electric Car, what happened in California, and how they just took all these electric cars and shredded them after the leases were up. They never let anyone buy one, even the ones that the owners who wanted to buy them, the people who had leased them that wanted to keep them. They just took them all into a big field and shredded them. It's interesting. And that's just one area of our life that has to do with free energy. And there's been a lot of people killed on just speaking up about that. But to be able to do it, one of the reasons why is it hasn't been done with enough love and understanding. It's always how something's done that makes it what it is. And so that's why I spent many years with every word being very carefully thought out, because I knew it's never succeeded. There have been a lot of attempts on this and it's never happened. So I put like 100% prayer intention every step of the way throughout that process. I had no external funding, so it's a low budget production. It doesn't even look as good as this presentation. My face isn't even on it, because that takes extra time and money just to do video editing with a scripted program where you are showing your face. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot easier if you can just shoot from the hip. The first time I presented that was on the 4th blood moon, September 27, 2015. If you remember the 4 consecutive blood moons, that was at Holiday Inn LAX at an event that a friend of mine who's a producer for a show had been asking me to speak at his events for years and years. And I'd always said no. And this is the first time I said yes. And I didn't know why. It was just following my gut spiritually. When I say when I feel take the leap of faith again, I just do it. And then I find out why later. I didn't even know what I was going to be talking on for my 5th talk in this 5D event that was happening. And, it's amazing that the hindsight, it's like, wow, okay, that was meant to happen. I never thought I would talk on those topics. Everything that you see presented in the laws of empowerment, I considered my personal interest material that I would never talk about publicly, ever. Wow. Unless God showed up someday to really show me that I was really meant to be speaking about those things. And that basically happened 24 hours before I got up on stage. And I spent the next, all the next time before I hopped on stage, whipping a PowerPoint presentation together, and boom, it happened. So that's a true story. I did that the night before, whipped up the PowerPoint presentation. So this is, I thought after that, one of the reasons why I decided is because it was being live streamed. It's hard to stop and shut someone up after it's already on the internet and it's evergreen. People can always go back and watch that. Even today, they could watch that one if they knew where to find it. So I just realized if I'm going to talk about it, why not give people my best? Spent the next few years pounding out a script I thought would be only 2, 3, 4 hours max.
Mm-hmm.
Several years later, a few years later, and 20 hours of scripted material, we had a production. Not something that I planned. I wouldn't have done it if I'd known it was going to be so hard.
Yeah. Isn't that the way though? Most people wouldn't if they know.
A lot of things that I've done, I would have never done if I'd known it was going to be so hard. If I'd have looked ahead and known what my life was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have said, heck no, I'll go into real estate investing.
Exactly. I'll make money. I'll do this instead.
Find somebody else. Somebody
Yeah.
else. You can find somebody else to do that. I mean, but when we're really on where it's really, if something is really meant to be,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's being done really right, the way that it's supposed to be done, then we're sustained every step of the way. And it's been one miracle after the other on a daily, multiple times per day basis. With every moment, it's just what's next. Sometimes when I have had no idea what that next step, what the next best thing is, it just happens. I get an invitation to the red carpet gala on New Year's Eve from a mutual friend. And, one of the other great friends of ours, his name is Steve Jennings, that is someone that I share a friendship with David Fagan, who invited me to that gala. He's been a friend for years. And Steve Jennings was, he'd been a male model and an athlete for years. And he'd been in a coma before, come out where doctors said he would never be able to do, the triathlete stuff again. And he proved them wrong. He did it all over again. And he wrote a book called The Way of the Invincible Warrior. Within it, he says if anybody gets any family member ever gets in a situation where they're in a coma, never pull the plug. Well, he got hit by a car. Another accident happened where the right and left hemisphere of his brain were severed. The neurons that connected him were severed. Oh, wow. The doctor said he'd never be able to breathe on him, that he'd never be able to breathe by himself again, that would be absolutely impossible for him to do. How could they say it's impossible just because they don't know how to do it?
Exactly.
I mean, the best thing they could say is, we don't know how, but doesn't mean the answers aren't out there somewhere. What it means is maybe you should look somewhere else. But they're trained to do the opposite. In their disempowered state, they just say, there's nothing you could do about this. That's what they've been saying for a long time, and they've been proven wrong over and over again. I had when we found out that they were going to be pulling the plug, I had 24 hours from an event that I was doing in Brooklyn, and I broadcast on social media. I made this one particular section of an all-day event that I do. I break down a lot of different techniques in a whole day. I call the Power Heal System Training Day. And this one particular section where I teach what I teach for what I learned from the neck up, work everything in the brain and everything from the neck up, how to target everything in the head. And I learned that I developed it for my own head injury, where I flew over a car off a motorcycle one day.
Jeez.
And had a lot of injuries from that more injuries all at once than any time in my life. And that's how I got the second MRI for that knee 20 years later, because I also re-injured that same knee and they wanted to do another surgery. And I said, how's the PCL? Well, anyway, back to the head. I decided to do something for Steve Jennings as another leap of faith, because I already had the after MRI of what I'd accomplished for my knee. And if I hadn't had that, maybe I wouldn't be taking another step to put my reputation on the line in a bigger way. But I really believed and saw things line up. So we set it up, and I had about 132 people hop on that Zoom for free that were all part of Steve Jennings Healing, because we integrated with prayer. I was in Brooklyn. He was at Cedars-Sinai in Hollywood. I couldn't get anything physically to him fast enough, but we could activate the stem cells long distance. So we did that, and 24 hours later, they pulled the plug and he was breathing on his own. They decided who was going to get his heart already. And when hospice gets involved, they give people basically 3 options, like 24 hours, 48 hours, or 5 days. So 1 day, 2 days, or 5 days. That's basically your options when hospice gets involved, or for how long you have till they OD him with morphine.
Oh my goodness.
And I believe that he had donor on his driver's license. He, I think there's a lot that we learn from this, and I think everything happens for a reason. But they just kept upping the dose of morphine until they killed him 48 hours later. The whole time he was breathing on his own. But he showed up in a vision about 3 hours before he actually died, thanking me for the miraculous healing. And he gave me a big hug. And I thought, man, he's doing great. He may make it. And, but he was really thanking me for the spiritual healing, I believe. See, around the same time, Mitchell Gibson, who's another spiritual master, he had his father's house get struck by lightning, and his father was burned alive. When he first saw his father's spirit, it was also all burnt. And instead of trying to sweep things under the rug, like how can a spiritual master have something like that, like an act of God, happen to his father? People ask foolish questions like that all the time. They just don't understand. Stuff happens. This is life. And it's how it's learning from it. That's the whole key. What are we getting from it? And he just asked all his people all over social media to keep using those miracle prayers that he'd introduced them to all those years. And 48 hours later, he saw his father's spirit completely healed. He was in a higher celestial realm, exactly where he was supposed to be. And this taught me something. This happened at the same time as what happened with Steve Jennings. And it taught me that it's the spiritual healing that's even more important than the physical healing. These physical miracles that we're creating, nothing compares to the spiritual work. Some people go lifetimes. I think, and I believe in all of it, right? I said I'm pretty integrated with what I believe as far as faith goes. So I think that there's a way that it really does all fit together. It's just having enough pieces to really see how it all works. And I get into a lot of stuff spiritually with the laws of empowerment as well. But I don't just jump right into the meat without giving people the stepping stones little by little. And hopefully, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that we have, each of us, when we're faced with our issues. We have two options: change our behavior or forget it. Did you know literally the brain partitions as we choose to forget it? And a lot of people will just let go of whatever's easier for them to let go of. Even if the thing that they're letting go of was actually what was really better for them to hang on to.
I've seen that happen.
And people change their belief system based on what they do more than anything else. And they'll surround themselves with a bunch of other people, especially the more they really go out of alignment with the laws of nature, the more they feel this need to surround themselves with other people who are doing the same thing.
I've never heard it put that way. That's amazing. I like that take. It resonates with me. I know what you're referring to.
We've seen a lot of this with what's happened the past few years.
Yeah, exactly.
That dynamic play out.
I have a question for you. Okay, so this is something I don't know. I wouldn't normally ask, but I feel like a lot of people, most people, I can't speak because I'm only me, but I feel like most people do have experiences with, the understanding and the knowing the spiritual side of things, but they don't recognize it for what it is and ignore it. Kind of like how, you had the 3 times that you were told that you needed to work with your dad, and you're just like, nope. I think most people just listen to the nope, and ignore the rest of the message, not realizing how powerful things can be if you tune in. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. That was the whole key. It was a leap of faith, knowing that I was going to be like grabbing a lion by the tail here and there. And that it wasn't that simple with that first conversation with my father. I'm glad I didn't pull that card out every day. There was only a few times where I had to remind him that I wasn't there to do what he told me to do, type of a thing. Yeah. But there was only a few times where I had to do that. And but boy, knowing sometimes the miracles just follow them that believe, and it's the hindsight. We can have some foresight too, but still it takes a leap of faith when you have nothing physically. I didn't have even a physical contract working with my father. And so all those things that he'd promised me before disappeared. Like as soon as I started real work with him, like the first day, all that was gone. We got set back like I don't know. I can't tell you how far. Even on day one, I didn't let that stop me. I just said, I told you that I'm just here to do what I know how to do to help you, that I'm not here for the money.
Yeah.
So that was my response to that. But the blessings, you know, there's certain things that every law that we put in action the right way, we get the blessing. And the cognitive dissonance factor, if that's been left out of the basic personal development model. But if you take the basic model that they've been using, like the one that's taught by Franklin Covey, this is basically the same thing that Ayn Rand produced. If you take the basic personal development model, they just basically change the words. I don't know if they do it knowingly or not, but the principles are the same, exact principles. But it's missing the cognitive dissonance factor. If you plug in cognitive dissonance, you start getting a grand integration of truth happening a lot faster. And I could say one of the great things of the laws of empowerment is there to show, the first thing that it's there to show is that really integration versus disintegration is life and death. It's integration of truth or disintegration of truth. You know, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that tie into this. You know, what happens when people believe and love a lie? They're destroyed. It's very destructive. So figuring out how to actually integrate what actual truth is, and it comes down to principles of nature, really is the core. My father knew really that his work was going to help show people the principles that really all that's the most important things for us to learn. And it's the principles that we build that world peace with, that we've all been wishing and hoping for. His vision was to raise up a society with no poor, with no disease, with and raise up a society into world peace. And how could you do that? That sounds impossible. And a lot of people would tell me that I'm absolutely crazy just by talking this way, that would be absolutely impossible to do. But every miracle has a process, and if you understand the process, then you can perform the miracle just as fast as me or anybody else. And there's a lot of examples of this that I can give just by, you know, instant mass healings that I do. That's another one of my .coms, instant mass healing. That if I take a whole audience and within a split second create a change that aligns all the neck and hips of everybody instantly, because of super conscious principles that are being activated the right way. And I've been doing this for many, many years, and anybody can learn how to apply those principles. I actually have processes with 100% success for people to learn how to activate those principles for themselves. And this gets into more of like higher realm being communication principles, what I like to call it. But I would have never gone into those discoveries without really living in that world and putting those principles into action and seeing the results. And I don't say that I'm the expert on the super conscious. There's so much to know. But when you put a principle in action over and over again and you get results in a controlled environment, after a while, your faith can sort of take a back seat in that thing. And not that you have the have all be all of all truth, but this works for any principle. It shines a brighter light around it when you get the results over and over again, where it's more of a knowingness. It shines a brighter light. It makes you aware of other principles that tie into it that you had no idea existed before. Then you start applying those principles and you put those into action. You might break the law and get the result until you finally get it right. But this is the first teaching that I could ever find, the oldest teaching that I can find. Can't find any older principle. Is put the principles in action and get the fruit. And science says put the laws in action and measure the results. So I say, here we are. What's the difference?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's people talk about, that's why laws of nature, nature's no respecter of persons. Put your hand on a hot stove, you get burned. Step in front of a moving truck, you get hit. Doesn't matter how righteous we think we are. These are laws of nature. And when we look at it, when we look at all of these principles that way, they're laws of nature that we have to figure out. And
well, I like the idea too, because once you know the laws and you understand them, you can work with them as opposed to just bumbling around and, you know, kind of just feeling things out, trying to do things against the grain. You don't have to do that anymore. You could just, you know, make things a little more streamlined. I love that idea though. And learning more.
We were given a master key for our hormones about 60 years ago. And these are principles that evidently have existed for thousands of years. I was at Chichen Itza last summer, and for my birthday, I have a picture of myself pointing at an image carved in stone on a pillar with bands at the top of his arms and legs. I'm pointing at his arms, but if you look at the legs, there's basically circles the same width as these multi-air chamber bands that now we see being used by LeBron James, who's the king of the NBA. Because it's the best key to our hormones, the fastest, easiest way. It's like a shortcut. You got to go below 30% oxygen to working muscles to get the chemistry in the blood the blood brain's looking for to send the signal to the pituitary to crank out the hormones. So anyway, evidently they were using it thousands of years ago, but 60 years ago in our modern science started in Japan. 40 years ago, they published what it does for diabetes and stabilizing blood sugar, just the hormone side of the equation, because these, you know, the pancreas produces insulin. That's one of the hormones. These are, there's 7 endocrine glands. There's also 7 chakras that they call them in India. The 7 houses is what they call them in China, that are also the energy centers. And there's a master key that turns them on energetically better than the master key of what turns on their physical production, which is the hormones. 2 separate things, what they do energetically. If we're taking hormones in externally from bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, it shuts these glands off as far as their physical production of the hormones, as well as the energy that they produce. When the energy comes out, the albumin locks, and that's what contributes. That's part of what contributes to the thickening of blood and to clotting. But as that locks, it also contributes to all tumors, which mean to swell. Comes from Latin, tumere, and all itises, which mean inflammation. It's all part of it. What's called trapped blood proteins is what I call locked blood proteins. When the energy comes out, that's the key that locks them. When you bring the energy back in, that's the key that unlocks them. So energy is a master key. And how much energy? Just the subtle energy that the sodium potassium pump normally produces, about 0.7, 0.9 millivolts. Very subtle, but it is measurable scientifically. And that's, again, the engine of the cells that my father discovered, the sodium potassium pump. It's an electric generator.
It's amazing.
So we have a key in energy alone that some of these things are so interconnected. We found out this master key of our hormones is really muscle failure. That's why doctors have said high intensity exercise so much. And yeah, over years and years and years doing calisthenics. Why, you know, how do people get pulled away from what we were taught even for so long?
Exactly.
What we did when we were younger. So the HGH, according to Harvard, is the #1 hormone as far as regeneration, #1 substance that our cells can produce for regeneration. And it typically takes a nosedive after the age of 22, levels off to about nothing until we die. But we figured out how to turn it right back up. Like, nice. Like these bands, they create a 25 times greater HGH release with them than without them. That's why you see Olympic athletes using them. The Japanese got their Olympic athletes on it first, and that's when we noticed, because they were dominating everyone out of nowhere. So we decided to take that and start running with it ourselves. And just a few years ago, the technology finally solved the safety issues, because everything that they'd been using has been basic tourniquet designs. And the multi-air chamber is the only thing that we figured out how to get it to where It's not sending a back pressure to the heart. It's not even creating any increase of arterial pressure. It's not capable of stopping blood flow like the tourniquet designs do. They can and do all those things. So we finally solved the safety issues.
That's good.
So I was introduced to that about 1.5 years ago, and amazing. I've never seen something transform the physique so fast and easy as just getting our hormones cranked up again. The TSH starts flowing in about 30 minutes from what's called the burn, just like the HGH. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone that turns on the thyroid for metabolism. So we've got a master key for our hormones. There's another master key for our DNA, and I mentioned that I would bring it up. And that's
just so you know, we have 3 minutes left. So we just I gotta make sure that we can get that in there, because I don't want to do half a thought.
Okay. So I'm just going to say, you know, there's one master key that is for our DNA that's been a huge focus in medical science. If you want more information on that, contact me, because there's more keys here and there, but it regulates all 36 cytokines, which nothing else does that. No jab does that. In fact, all the drugs of the past, they target one gene at a time out of basically 5,000 disease mechanism genes. And there's something we're born producing that does all 5,000. And guess what? Fasting is one of the activators of it. It doesn't cost one thing to do. And there's some things in our diet, like there's sulforaphane in broccoli and cauliflower. There's about 7 times more sulforaphane in broccoli sprouts than regular broccoli.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, you know, there's things, some herbs activate it, and there's multiple mechanisms that we know now, where in the beginning we figured out one known mechanism and we started getting results just with that we've never seen before. This is radically changing the pharmaceutical model, is the master key for our DNA. So there's a new model, and I'm going to just give one more quote from Buckminster Fuller. He said, "We never change something by fighting the existing reality. To change something, to change a thing, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And sometimes they just show up for us. There have been several models as master keys that activate whole, you know, one master key for our whole branch of our tree of life that's responsible for producing all the fruits we call hormones. Another that's all different kinds of proteins, 5,000 different proteins that do different things. Some of them they call cytokines, some of them peptides, enzymes, all different proteins that do different things. So there's and on and on and on, and we keep learning as we go. So hopefully you enjoyed.
No, I'm absolutely fast. It was so good. I didn't even go to commercial break. Sorry to the sponsors.
You can do that now.
Like, fascinated. So thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been one of my absolute favorite episodes ever. So thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I noticed that there was no commercial break after we were almost halfway through, and I didn't say anything about it. But maybe I should.
No, I was like, I just want to keep going. So, but we are out of time now. So I do want to say thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope that, you know, everybody else, I know everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did. But real quick too, I want to make sure this is the best way people can learn more from you, about you, and what you teach, Master Keys.
Yeah, that's the main website. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and have a great night. And that is all the time that we have for today. I wish it was a 2-hour show, honestly, but it is time. So enjoy the rest of your week, everyone, and we will see you again soon.